like to welcome all of you and thank you for coming to celebrate the life and memory of Gordon Bennett Robertson, Jr. Many of you have come a very long way to be here today. Ben would have been proud. Most of you knew him as Ben, and I knew him as my father, Dad, and many years later as Ben. I thought I knew him fairly well, even though I've lived 1,300 miles away for the past 35 years. But thanks to all of you and the wonderful stories that you've shared with me, I've come to know many new things about Ben. You said the following: always so nice, a real gentleman, the real deal, a true American hero, always smiling, doing for others, never complaining, always had a new joke, great guy, mentor. I learned a lot from him, forever indebted to him, and on and on and on. I think you knew him better than I. You overlooked his faults and you celebrated his character. Near the top of one of the piles on his desk, I found something that he recently wrote. If wealth is lost, nothing is lost. If health is lost, something is lost. If character is lost, everything is lost. Perhaps knowing a bit about how he grew up will help you understand how he came to be Ben. He grew up in Omaha, the son of a banker. He was raised with typical Midwestern values and a strong sense of character, integrity, and patriotism. He grew up with lots of platitudes and cliches that influenced and guided him. His mother's favorite was, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." If you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves, and a penny saved is a penny earned. Save for a rainy day. Truth will out. Don't be critical of another until you've walked a mile in his moccasins. Blood is thicker than water, and birds of a feather flock together. Haste makes waste. Ye reap what ye have sown. Don't count your chickens before they're hatched, and hard work never hurt anybody. Experience is the best teacher, and don't look back. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and when in doubt, don't. Pride goeth before a fall, a stitch in time saves nine. Make hay while the sun shines, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. Never chase after a woman. They're like streetcars. There'll be another one along in a minute.
That sounds like Ben.
And finally, if you save a thing long enough, you will find a use for it. And that one, I tell you, that one permeated his soul. Going through his apartment, I discovered he was saving many things for some presumable future use. He had a lifetime supply of pencils, paper clips, notepads, and bags of all sizes and shapes. But in amongst the things, I found a large bag filled with dozens and dozens of air sickness bags. Now, I'm still wondering what future use he might have had in mind for these.
Boxes everywhere.
Yeah, anyway, when I was here back in October, we stopped in at Harbor Freight to purchase some batteries. And at the checkout stand, Ben produced a coupon from his wallet that entitled the bearer to one free flashlight with any purchase. When we got back in the amazing Cadillac, he dropped the new flashlight in the center console. And there were several dozen of those flashlights in the center console.
I gave him two. I gave him two flashlights.
He looked up and he winked at me and he said, "The girls like
I
them."
gave him two.
He was taught about firearms and hunting at a young age, and he enjoyed hunting up until his 80s, until he could no longer handle the physicality of it. He had a great number of hunting buddies and enjoyed many, many trips all over the West and Mexico. He always wanted to go to Africa, but he never made it. Ben was a young man in college when patriotic duty called. Most of you know a large part of the story from here. He was trained as a fighter pilot, became an instructor, and learned to fly heavy bombers. He flew 35 missions as a B-29 aircraft commander and earned the Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters and a Distinguished Flying Cross. Those are over here on display if you'd like to see them. He brought all his crew home with him, and for that, he was forever a hero to those guys. He retained a lifelong interest in flying, and thanks to people present here today, he flew a B-17 just 5 years ago when he was 88 years old. And I know he thoroughly enjoyed the flights he took with you guys in your jet jobs, as he liked to call them. Anyway, after the war, Ben returned stateside, got married. I was born, and shortly thereafter my sister. He pursued a career as a mortgage banker, mostly in Southern California, and was still working in that business at least 3 days a week until this past December. This past Wednesday would have been his 94th birthday. In addition to flying, he loved the outdoors, hunting, dogs, horses, reloading, reading, and girls. Ben remained vital up until very nearly the end. And in fact, while in the ICU under an oxygen mask 2 days before his death, he learned of an opportunity from an associate who was visiting him, and Ben began trying to put together a deal. Like most of his comrades in arms, he never talked much about his wartime experiences, and then in the 80s, many vets began to gather and share their stories. Ben got hooked up with his old outfit and crew members, and they organized and began having reunions every couple of years. I believe Ben attended every single one of them, and he was the president of the association for the last 4 to 6 years of its existence. My wife Sherry and I were privileged to attend many of those reunions and to meet some very, very special and incredible people. Jim Patillo, that's Colonel Jim Patillo, the CEO of the 20th Air Force Association, called me earlier this week, and he wanted everyone here to know that it was the work that Ben and the guys he flew with in the 29th Bomb Group that made their job so much easier in the 58th. He said that Ben and the 29th figured out how it was done. He sincerely regretted he could not attend today's ceremony. In recent years, Ben enjoyed going to air shows and selling his book, and apparently old photos, it appears, and telling stories to anybody who would listen. Where did I go here? Anybody? I'm grateful for those of you who attended those events with him to carry his books, chairs, and equipment when that became difficult for him. In case you haven't read his book, I have brought several pre-publication loose leaf copies of the manuscript, and you're welcome to take one of those after the service. I've got them kind of over here in the corner right now. And for the girls, I brought the flashlights. And there are also a small number of his favorite bookmarks and other small things that we'd really like to have you take as mementos. They're in a red box, I believe, over on that table, and I'd really like for each of you to have a little piece of Ben. I found these around the apartment, so I really want you guys to have what might be meaningful to you. And the air sickness bags are available too, if you like. I often worried that he was alone out here in Southern California, but now I know that he wasn't alone. You guys were his family. You were a wonderful and loving family, and you kept an eye out for him when I couldn't. I know that he seldom had to buy a drink, if you can call a green dildo a drink. I know that he had regular lunch and dinner dates where he couldn't pick up the tab. One of you gave him a cash stash to carry with him in case he needed it. One of you subscribed to the Wall Street Journal for him. Others brought him groceries in Hawaii. And certainly there had to be hundreds of other acts of kindness that I know nothing about. And for this, we are very grateful. And when I say we, I mean me, my wonderful wife Sherry, who Ben adored, and my sister Becky, who is in Hawaii and could not make it for this service. She and Ben were not close, but she wanted all of you to know that she loved you. As many of you know, Ben wasn't a particularly religious man, but he certainly understood that there was a higher power. And he frequently gave acknowledgement. Sometimes when viewing a sunset, he would say out loud, directed to nobody in his immediate vicinity, "Nice job," or "Well done," and give a nod, acknowledging the Creator. Ben was buried at 11:02 this morning in the Riverside National Cemetery in his Army Air Corps dress uniform. The U.S. Air Force has sent an honor guard here to give him a military send-off. And after this brief ceremony and the flyover, we're going to hear from several of you with remembrances of Ben. And so now I would like to adjourn outside where we'll have the Air Force ceremony, and I think there's going to be some airplanes flying by here in a minute or two too. So if we can kind of regroup out there, and then we'll return here in a few minutes. Are we about ready to go again?
Ladies and gentlemen, during the playing of taps, if you're military or paramilitary, you may render one final hand salute. All others may place your right hand over your heart.
Maybe we could get started again.
Never seen her before in my life.
Once again, I thank everybody for coming to this service for Ben. And now you're going to hear from several of his good friends with stories, I guess. Hopefully some of them will be good, but the first one is going to come from Sean Matheson, who was a great friend to Ben and who has become a great friend to me in the past couple of weeks. Sean?
All right.
Try to keep it together. It's an honor to be here to speak to everybody, and it's a delight to see so many people here to honor Ben. Recently, I looked up the word honor, and one of the key words in there is recognition. And one of the things I recognized about Ben is what he did for me and all of us, which was to provide the freedom to do what we needed to do in our lives, to fulfill our purpose in our life. Now, in Ben's life, he lived in a time of survival. And he fulfilled his purpose at the beginning of his life. And he did it so well, I think he was given a long life. And the main reason I'm here speaking first is not because I knew him better than anyone else, because I'm sure there's many here who knew him much better than I. But it was because I was with him at the moment he died. And I'm here to reassure everybody here who loved Ben that he died with peace, with freedom, and with someone who loved him at his side. As flying was to Ben, spirituality is to me. And he couldn't have had a more fitting person beside him when he left this earth. And there's one thing I am sure of, as he is of the control panels of the B-29, is that the spirit lives on. I want to reassure everyone here that that was facilitated, that he was reassured that all of his affairs would be tied up, that everything would be taken care of, and that he will be sent off correctly. And I have to say it has been done so. I don't think it could have unfolded better if it were planned by NASA or whoever. This, as Bruce and I have been going through Dan's personal items over the last couple of weeks, problems were solved as they were meant. And this indicates to me that everything was as it should be. From the moment he passed until now, everything has moved very smoothly, and I can't tell you how delighted I am to see everyone here and to meet people that I have heard about from Ben. So this fills it in for me quite unexpectedly, perfectly. And I just want to say thank you for everyone for making it here and showing the respect for a man who had such vitality up until his last day. And I'm sure that he will fulfill every other mission that he has from now on with as much perfection as he did the 35 over Japan. Thank you.
Michael, this is Michael Koss, a very long time business associate of Ben's.
Yes, apropos to that comment that Ben's spirit will live on, it will most certainly live on in our company with all of us, and we have quite a few of us that came out today before Ben's ceremony. And I'd like to say that in addition to his feats and accomplishments, which were obviously very extraordinary and greatly admired in the war, Ben had an incredibly accomplished career professionally in business. I don't know if all of you realize that Ben was a general contractor, who was a licensed insurance agent, who was a licensed real estate broker. He had been president of a major savings and loan for a period of time in Los Angeles, and he had a really remarkable business career. We were fortunate to benefit from because Ben worked with us. Following all of that, he joined my firm 20 years ago. And at that time, he was working, assisting us as a loan advisor in our mortgage company. Well, years later, we transitioned from the mortgage business, and we became involved more in the real estate development construction business, and then Ben continued to work with us as an advisor in our construction department. He was 73 years old at the time that he came to work with us. He was actually worked with us for almost 21 years. And I can say without any hesitation that the entire time that he worked with us, from the inception to the end of his working with us, was really just a couple of months before he became ill and wasn't able to come to the office too much. He really was as sharp, just as keen, as anybody that I've ever worked with in my business career. He was exceptionally thoughtful, he was articulate, and he was competent. His verbal communication and his writing were beyond excellent, they were really eloquent. He consistently demonstrated excellent judgment, and he gave us excellent advice in a lot of areas of our business. Even over the last year, when he did not feel well, he still came to the office regularly. And I think that this was a great testament to his strong work ethic. I often watched him walk down our long hallway from behind, erect with military posture and a spring in his step. And I was amazed at how youthful a manner and walk that Ben had. I often said that if I watched Ben from behind when he was 93 years old, I might have thought that it was somebody that was 22 years old. Along with his resonant voice and his impressive stance, he projected strength and intelligence. Ben was a serious and proper person, and still he was sweet and kind, and with a good sense of humor. Never harsh and always a kind word. That's the way I thought of Ben the entire time I was with him. Ben was truly a hero to all of us in our company. He was a patriot and a true gentleman, and we will all miss him greatly.
And another one of Ben's longtime business associates, Paul Lehman.
Ben had a few of what I call Benisms. For example, when somebody would greet Ben with a familiar greeting, "How are you doing?" Ben would respond with an unusual answer, "I'm still trying to do it." Or if you asked Ben if he wanted to do something, Ben would say, "That would be fine," or "I'd be happy to do it." In recent years, if someone greeted Ben with, "How's it going?" Ben would often respond, "I'm still upright." Unfortunately, of course, Ben is no longer upright. And we're here to pay tribute to a memorable person, someone that many of us felt very close to, including me. Ben wasn't just a business associate. Ben was at our house many times for many Thanksgivings and other events. Ben had the amazing ability to relate extremely well to almost everybody. I don't recall ever seeing Ben particularly angry or stressed. Ben was even-tempered, and it was an excellent temperament indeed. At my 70th birthday party last year, I went around the room and introduced each person. It took about an hour. This is what I had to say about Ben. Mr. Ben Robertson. It didn't occur to me to call anyone else Mr. at my party except for Ben. I met Ben about 40 years ago. Ben was a good friend of my father's. Ben is truly a Renaissance man. Ben knows an incredible amount about so many things, particularly things outdoors, like deer and dogs and ducks and airplanes, of course, and cars. So we made a pretty good team through the years. Being Jewish, I know almost nothing about those things. Ben is 93, going on 70. Ben not only still drives a car, still flies airplanes, he still chases women, and he often catches them. And then when I said that, Ben immediately responded from the audience, I guess, well, a few get away.
That's Ben.
Yeah. Maybe the explanation for Ben's youthfulness is his well-documented, very high testosterone level.
Yes.
A level that would put most teenagers to shame. So I try to stay close to Ben. And rub elbows with him. Hoping that some of that testosterone will rub off of me. But that doesn't seem to be working very well. Even though, sadly, I won't be able to rub elbows with Ben any longer, I will stay close to my fond memories of Ben. In conclusion, there is much to say about Ben. As several people said to me when they heard of Ben's passing, he was one of a kind. They don't make him like that anymore. He was one in a million. Of course, Ben will be sorely missed by many. So Ben, goodbye, cowboy. Goodbye, soldier. Goodbye, dear friend.
introduce you to my business partner of 36 years and a former U.S. Marine Corps officer, Harry Shimanoff.
Listening to these stories is, of course, heartwarming, awesome. I only met Ben once, 20 years ago. When he walked in the room, he said to me, "My son said that you served in the Marines." And I said, "Yes, sir. I was an infantry officer from 1970 to 1973. Ben walked over to me, shook my hand, embraced me, and thanked me for my service. The irony was, I was going to thank him, because in 1945, my dad was a private in the Marines on Okinawa, getting ready to go to Japan, and it never happened, and I'm here. 12 years ago, I received a manuscript in the mail, and when I opened it up, it was the book. And Ben asked if I would edit it. And as I went through the book, I could not believe, not just the detail and the planning of every mission, but the bravery, the courage, the integrity, the discipline, the patriotism to fly 35 combat missions and bring his men home. The book sold over 10,000 copies. I too have written a book. And according to Kindle Amazon, last year I sold 3 copies. I happen to have 10 in my car.
I'll buy one.
They're autographed already. Obviously, I'm a better editor than an author. 5 years ago, I get a phone call from Bruce, and he shared a story with me about his father that I'd like to relate. Ben went to Las Vegas to select a venue for the annual reunion of the B-29 pilots. At the end of the first day in the hotel, and I don't know which hotel it was at, there was a knock on the door, and he looked through the peephole, and it was room service, and they brought a fruit basket. Ben accepted it, and they said, you know, thank you for staying here, and we hope you will select our hotel for your reunion. Ben said, thank you very much, but I have some other places I need to go visit. So the next day, Ben went out, went to several other venues, came back, was in his room, there was a knock on the door, and he peeked outside, and this time it wasn't room service, but it was a young lady. Ben opened the door, and she said, are you Mr. Robertson? And he goes, yes, I am. She goes, the hotel has arranged for me to entertain you for an hour.
Oh, God.
Ben, being the officer and gentleman that he was, closed the door. Immediately got on the phone and called his son, Bruce. Bruce, you're not going to believe what happened. Last night, the hotel brought me a fruit basket, and tonight they brought me an adult entertainer. And Bruce goes, well, did you invite her in? And he goes, no. And Bruce goes, why not? He goes, I didn't want to tell my friends I caught chlamydia. Every time I see a commercial of Las Vegas, it reminds me of this. I know we're saddened by the demise of Ben, but I recall his, not just his bravery, and his loyalty and his patriotism, and his incredible flying acumen, his awesome son. Heaven should be happy. It has another way.
This next man needs, I think, probably no introduction at all. You can look him up afterwards if you don't recognize him. Mr. Clay Lacey.
Who's Clay Lacey?
Well, I really haven't not too much about what I'm going to say about Ben. But anything you said about Ben, it's got to be good or you're lying. He was a real remarkable person. And I was very lucky to get to know him maybe 35 years ago around the airport here. And to know a man that had flown 35 nations over Japan during World War II was just unbelievable to me. And anyway, everything that Ben stood for was patriotism, good things for this country, good things for his friends, good things for the community. Just an outstanding person. And I feel so lucky to have got to know Ben and to travel a little bit with him. We never traveled a lot with him. He went with me down to the Confederate Air Force a couple times later. And that was an interesting deal to go through the B-29 with him and ask him a few questions, and they were in his mind. He knew the answers. The other thing was to see Ben climbing that B-29 and with no effort at all, and like he just done it yesterday, climb up the steps. You know, it's not that easy, for me anyway, anymore, to climb around those big airplanes. And, well, big airplanes, but they've got small places to climb to. And Ben just did a remarkable job. But the way he remembered things about World War II, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. Our first almost encounter was I lived in Wichita, and Ben was stationed 70 miles west of me, Great Bend, Kansas. And that I'm sure the times when I'd ride my bicycle out to Boeing and lay it and pull a B-25 or B-29 from me across the road, that there was one or two at least or more that Ben was flying and was going to fly. And it was, to me, it was one of the most honored things in my life was to know Ben, because of his connection with World War II, and just an outstanding person. I was happy I got to fly with him some, and but here in his 90s, past 90 years old, he remembered things. You know, when the questions they asked throughout the day, flying to Learden, Texas, he'd say, "Is that RPM synchronizer? What is it?" I mean, he was up to date on everything. And the last time I saw Ben about 2 weeks ago, he was in the hospital over in Santa Monica. Why, he was in such great shape that night I couldn't believe it. You know? I fell down myself here about 3 months ago. I've been walking so good. Ben was getting up and walking when he wasn't supposed to be, I don't think. And just so much energy, and that evening, his talk, his speech and everything was just right on. There wasn't a thing that I could tell that he was badly deteriorating. And as a matter of fact, he seemed like he was coming back up the hill. And at any rate, 30 years, and I wouldn't see him all the time. I was seeing him at Denny's or someplace to go in, and he always had the appropriate thing to ask you, and always made you feel better. I'd love to be around Ben because he made you feel better. And I think that I've always been happy about that I chose for my life work being a pilot. But it was people like Ben that really made me feel that way, and he was such a shining light in everything he did, and including being a pilot. And at least Ben, we're here right now to tell stories to us, and he can tell great stories. Love his stories. And we were lucky to know him. All of us in this room and other people just lucky to know Ben. So I say to everyone here tonight, we're all going to meet Ben again, and I want to try and hold up my end of the deal and continue being a good friend. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you.
Jerry, where are you? I'd like you to meet Jerry Epstein. Jerry was one of Ben's students. He was a bombardier student in Victorville in 1943.
I'll just Bruce said a little bit earlier that Ben loved quotes and quotations, and I can only think of one: God works in mysterious ways. I am a client of Michael Koss, and I'm trying to remember, it was probably about 5 years ago, or maybe a little more, Michael can help me, that I walked into Michael's office, and Michael said to me, I believe at the time, there's somebody here that's 2 years older than you are. And that was when he introduced me to Ben. We really became good friends. We didn't see each other too often, but I was really thrilled at the fact that in April 1943 in Victorville, next to George Air Force Base, Ben was my bombardier's instructor. Everything that you heard about him this afternoon is certainly apropos of the gentleman that I knew. And I'm very fortunate, as I said, to meet someone that I met 72 years ago, and helped me. Even though he flew 29s, believe me, it took a lot more courage for him to teach us how to fly and to teach us all the tricks of the trade. So I thank you very, very much, Bruce, for allowing me to come today.
It's an honor to have you here, Jerry. Thank you. John, please come on up here. I think you wanted to say something, didn't you, John?
I'm John here.
Oh, excuse me, I meant John.
The other John?
Come on up. It doesn't matter.
Your call.
Go ahead.
I have 2 Johns in a row here on the list. And they were like, anyway, there we go.
I think Clay Lacey's right. It's, of course, we all love aviation. But it's not just about airplanes. It's about pilots. And in the end, those friendships with other pilots are just impossible to describe, and with such great value. I'm reminded at moments like this about that. QB members, raise your hand if you're a QB. Look at all that testosterone. And even a few cowboys. Charles Lindbergh, Jimmy Doolittle, Roscoe Turner, Gordon Cooper, Tony LeVere, Bob Hoover, and Ben Robertson. Now, what do these men have in common? Sure, they all flew airplanes. One was even an astronaut, but there's much more. They're all QBs. Now, if you don't fly, you probably don't know that QB stands for Quiet Birdman.
Yeah.
And even a few pilots I've encountered don't even know who we are. And that's because we are the ancient and secret order of Quiet Birdmen. And for more than 9 decades now, this nationwide fraternal group of aviators has managed to stay pretty quiet. We like it that way. Now, we identify ourselves with a membership card. It's made of stainless steel in case you crash and burn. They'll know you were a QB. Now, if you look at it, it doesn't say that the bearer is a good pilot. In fact, the word pilot is not even on the membership card. It says he is, quote, a certified good fellow. Flying just gets you in the door as a guest or a future candidate to become a QB, and our candidacy and initiation process is very lengthy. You absolutely have to be a good fellow, and that makes it hard for some guys to get in. Of course, we do screen our lawyer pilots very But when we gathered for our monthly membership meetings right here at this restaurant at 94th, down in the big room downstairs, truly it is like being with 50 to 100 of your best friends. I'm not exaggerating. So the common bond among QBs is friendship, not just flying. And undoubtedly, Ben was a war hero in the Pacific, fighting for our freedoms, for which we're deeply grateful. He had a very successful business career, as you heard, and he was a good husband and father. Apparently, he was a pretty good lover, but that's another story.
That's true.
Don't ask me about that.
But seriously, my only point here today is that Ben was a good fellow, a dear friend of every member of the Los Angeles QB organization, and we will be missed.
How about you now, John? I'm sorry for the confusion. John Ferguson is one of the men responsible for seeing that Ben got to fly B-17 just a few years ago. So I'm greatly indebted to him, so I think Ben was too.
Not a lot I can say, really. My wife and I, Caroline, have known Ben for probably about 10 years, I guess. And we met you right here in the 94th, coming here for drinks and got to chat and talk about old airplanes and become great friends. He was really just a wonderful guy. Instilled all the values and the things that make that generation great. But it was great to talk to him about his flying experience, of course, in World War II and the B-17 when he did his transition, his forging transition into the B-29 before the B-17 first for about 300 hours. And when he found out that I was checking out in the B-17, he was just a wealth of information. He said, have my old manual, and gave me all kinds of great advice. And then he checked with me, how was it going? And I say, well, I scared the hell out of myself yesterday. And he said, well, that was a really good experience for you. And so wonderful guy, wonderful knowledge. And when we bring the B-17 here to town, over in Burbank, Ben would always come out and talk to the kids and tell them all about World War II and all the things that he went through and the things that make the country great. But we got to take him flying a number of times in the airplane. And it was great because I'd get out of the seat and Ben would get in there and just grab those controls, and it was like it was yesterday. I'll come back and he'd just fly that B-17 like it was yesterday. So it was, you know, that's all really I can say. I mean, he was a great friend, a great person, great career advice. I'm a lifelong pilot and career pilot, professional pilot. The advice, the values, it doesn't get any better than Ben. doesn't. And I can always count on the fact that when I was out of town, he would call my wife. And I leave messages for her, so making sure I was out of town if I wanted to come to the bar for a drink. So, yeah, it was, I think we all know Ben, and he was a wonderful, wonderful guy. He'll be missed, but I also have very fond memories and never forget all the advice that he gave me. So, and my wife, friends and family. That's what I'll say. Thank you.
I'd like to say a couple of words, please. Matt Morris, one of Ben's business associates.
I
have a couple of words here from one of our colleagues, Delia Coleman, who was unable to make it here this afternoon. She actually had a rush her mom out to the hospital, so hopefully she's okay. Anyway, Delia would like to express these words. She says, "It is with great sadness that we are here today to celebrate the life of a great colleague and friend. What will I remember most about Ben? His laughs, his kindness, and his sincerity and happy nature. What will I miss most about Ben? A happy and knowledgeable colleague, his funny jokes, and hearing stories about his love for flying airplanes. Ben was a positive person who would not want us to be sad today. If he were here today, he would tell us to cheer up, smile, and remember of all the great memories we have all shared. Even though Ben may be gone, his memory will live on in all of us forever. Today, let's celebrate Ben's life and remember all the remarkable things he has accomplished and how wonderful his life was." Appreciate that. I just wanted to share a story about Ben that I had with him. The show kind of, my story is basically what type of man he was. He's very sure of himself. He's a solid guy. About 7 years ago, I was sitting at my office desk when one of my colleagues came in and excitedly told me that she had just came in from our parking lot where she saw Ben being harassed by a young man and that I should get out there to make sure Ben was okay. So I rushed right out there to see what was going on. I found Ben and this young man standing about 15 feet from each other with a man screaming at Ben about something. I approached the young man and asked him what was the problem. He explained to me that Ben had cut him off when he was changing lanes and that he followed Ben so they could give him a peace of mind. Keep in mind, during this whole time, Ben hasn't said one word to the young man or me. I asked the young man where this took place, and he told me at the 101-405 freeway. Now our office, just in case none of you are familiar with it, is on San Michael Boulevard just west of the 405. So he followed Ben for like 10, 12 miles with his road rage, which was, I was just amazed myself. Anyway, I finally get the guy to calm down, and he finally gets back in his car and he leaves. Now, at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about myself for having Ben's back and, like the rest of his friends here today, being a good wingman. I turn to Ben, who still hasn't said a word this whole time, and he just looks at me, adjusts the brim of his cowboy hat, and says, "Gee, Matt, I don't know why you thought you had to get involved. I had the situation completely under control."
Now I'd like you to hear from Bob Skirstonis.
Hi everybody. I met Ben back around 2000 through a mutual friend of ours who both Ben and I continually asked who introduced us. And Ben came to me with a project. The project was back then scanning in all these photos of airplanes in World War II. And I said, "Where'd you get all these?" He says, "From the Army Air Corps." I'm like, "Okay." So the first batch he dropped off was about this high. Then he dropped off a batch this high. He brought up a box. And I had all the equipment back then to scan all these photographs into the book that you folks have read, most of you. And it was very much a pleasure meeting him in that respect. A few years later, Ben was off in Las Vegas at the Thunderbirds and came back and he says, "Come out to my car." He says, "For what?" And he says, "I've got something for you." And there in the back of the car is an autographed signatures of the Thunderbirds. He says, thanks. For what? And he says, for helping me out. Okay. So Ben and I became good friends over the years. We had a number of parties at our house out in Robertson. And one of my other friends, who was 10, 12 years younger than Ben, had a girlfriend who was a 1973 bunny. And so the bunny, I'm not going to mention names, the bunny decided to give Ben a back massage in front of her boyfriend. So Ben called me up the following day and says, do you have her phone number? And I said, sure, I'll get it for you. All in all, Ben was a wonderful friend. He gave us a lot of laughs. We met regularly down the airfield, and he was good at telling stories, along with a lot of other friends who were down there telling stories of aircraft and aviation. And it's just a pleasure to know him, and I think that's why we're all here. Thank you.
George, you get back here yet? Not yet. Hopefully he'll be back here. George was in the civilian flyover piloting one of the aircraft there, so he's otherwise engaged right now. And do I see Dave here in the apartment? I don't. Well, if George shows up shortly, you'll hear from him. George has done tremendous things, not only to do with today, but he's been a great friend to Ben for a long time. I'm not real sure exactly how they met. I know they go to the same mailbox place to collect their mail from their personal mailboxes. But when I met George here, it's been a while ago now, but turns out I used to work for the same outfit, Challenge Publications. I worked for them back in the 70s that George works for now. And it's only been about 3 or 4 weeks ago, in my stuff, I found my Challenge Publications business card. And I sent that to George, and we had a little bit of reminiscing over things. But George was the one that put together the flyovers here today. George kept Ben in magazines, Air Progress, some Warbirds, and so on. So I do hope you get to hear something from him. But I'd like to leave you with a few words that I believe Ben wrote. They were on a small typewritten piece of paper, again kind of near the top of one of the piles on his desk. I don't know if you ever, he worked in piles, I think I got that from him too, but anyway, it was near the top and typewritten. And it said, as I traverse the last paths and take the final steps of my life, I realize how much I owe to my forebears, but especially to my father. He is part and parcel of me, or perhaps I of him. Or whatever I am, or for whatever I have, he gave it to me. Know him again. We have this room till 4 o'clock, so I would encourage all of you. Oh, here's George. Fantastic. George, I gotta go. We have this room till 4, so please hang around.
I would like to say a couple of words.
Yeah, I know.
Is someone in front of me or?
No, you're up.
Good afternoon, folks. A solemn occasion, but for a wonderful, unbelievable guy. I had the pleasure of knowing for a short part of his life, 5 or 6 years, I guess. We met by coincidence. We shared a post office box in Woodland Hills. The people in my box said, you know, there's another ex-military guy here that comes in. I think he was in World War II. Well, I haven't seen any guys that old around here. And they introduced me to Ben, and that began a friendship. It's unfortunately short-lived, but I sure enjoyed it. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of things about Ben here, and I don't know if I can add to it except that I've just been touched by a really special guy. And they say that a person can be judged a little bit by what he leaves behind, and got to tell you, this man here is a symbol of Ben's life. This is one unbelievable gentleman who has stepped up and done everything a son could possibly do with his dad's passing. And he and friend Sean have just been unbelievable in this time of sadness. So I know this is for Ben, but Bruce and Sean are two wonderful folks that keep Ben's spirit alive for a long time. Thanks for coming.
Is there anyone else that I didn't have on my list that would like to share a few words about Ben? I'd be delighted to have you come on up. Come on,
Do I have
Ben.
to come up there? Come on from here. Sorry,
I think everybody ought to see her, don't you?
Yeah.
Ben, want her to come up here?
I just wanted to point out on how determined Ben was. He used to come out and dove hunt with my husband. They both shared the desire to go to Africa and hunt over there. My husband hasn't got to go either. But I want to tell you guys about this story. I don't know if Ben had grandchildren, but I know he had one because we shared her. And he came out and he sat for hours and hours trying to teach my granddaughter how to make a snowman. And that might not seem all that weird to you guys, but we live in the Mojave Desert. The child had never seen snow. So he sat from breakfast until 2 o'clock trying to teach her how to make a snowman. And she just turned 12 and she still remembers. We told her we were coming out here, not understanding, she's never been to a funeral, but she says, tell him bye for us. So I just wanted to tell you how determined Ben was, and he was really special to us. So thank you, Bruce, for sharing your dad with all of us.
Bruce, I'll tell a story that Ben told us downstairs one night.
Is it clean?
Watch out. Boy, everybody knows it. I can't really do it justice because he had it down so well that it took about 10 minutes, but I'm going to shorten it up because he had so much detail in it. But he tells a story. We asked the old timers. He says, we want you to tell us what your most embarrassing moment in the air was. So Ben says, well, it wasn't quite in the air, but it goes back to, it goes back to when I was flying that B-29 out of the South Pacific and get ready for a run over Japan. And he said, we're out there on a hard pan. He says, my crew chief's in front of me and my lineman is out there and the lineman's out there where the fire extinguishers are getting ready to put out a fire in case the engines decide to explode when we try to start them. He said, and the other B-29s were all up and down the line there. They're all getting started. My crew chief out in front of me gives me the signal to close the bomb bay door. So I reach over and flip the toggle switch and I go about my business for a second. So then I look up and I see my crew chief and he's in his Jeep and he's going about 100 miles an hour. He said, that's very odd because he's not supposed to leave until I'm ready to go. So then I look over and I see my lineman and he looks like he's running the 100-yard dash in about, 4 flat. And I look over here and the right-hand guy and he's taken off and torn off like, scared to death. He said, I looked down and I realized I didn't close the bomb bay doors and I hit the bomb toggle. He said, I've dropped my whole bomb load out of the hard pan and out there rolling around. And he says, so we shut the engines back down. He says, I get out of the airplane. He says, a few minutes later, here comes a Jeep comes roaring up with the flags on the front fenders. And the general gets out and he's screaming. He says, where's the son of a bitch that's trying to blow up my squadron? I'm going to kill him. And if 3 guys hadn't restrained him, you might not be here.
I can augment that story. I can augment that story just slightly. They had been having trouble with some bombs not going off when they hit the ground or at appropriate times. And immediately before the mission in question here, they had redesigned the fuses on the bombs such that they were supposed to go off with a small impact from dropping 10 feet or less. Brand new detonators, and guess what? Not a one of them went off. And as a result of that incident, they redesigned that center console on the B-29, and they put a guard over the bomb salvo switch rather than having it exactly next to the closed bomb bay door switch. Anyway, thank you again for coming. I'd encourage you to hang around, talk story here for a while. We've got some refreshments and some food. I'd really like for all of you to take something from a memento thing. We've got a number of copies of his manuscript down here. If you don't have one of those, please help yourself. And if I haven't gotten to meet you individually up to now, please come by and introduce yourselves. I'd like to talk to each one of you individually. Thank you very much for coming.
The fidelity, patriotism, and valor of American airmen, soldiers, and sailors have made our land the last best hope on earth. If our sovereignty is to endure and the heritage of our culture is to survive, then freedom must always be cherished above all else, and we must not forget it has never been free.